Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, Maseches Megillah Daf Gimel. We were holding towards the bottom of Beis Amid Beis. 1, 2, 3 lines from the bottom. V'amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, v'itema, and some say it was Rabbi Chia bar Abba. Minatz pach soifim amram. There are 5 letters in the Aleph Beis that come in 2 versions. We have the open mem and the closed mem, the bent nun and the straight nun. Same with the tzaddik, the fei, and the chaf. Who told us about these 2 versions, these double letters, soifim? They're the visionaries, those that have visions of Hashem, the Nevi'im. Rashi says, Nevi'ei hadoros. This concept was introduced to Klal Yisrael by the Nevi'im throughout the Doros. It's interesting. Taisus points out, why do we call it manatz pach? If it would be in order, it should be chaf, then mem, then nun, then tzaddik. Why do we call it manatz pach? He says, loshin neifel al haloshin. It's sort of like a play on words. It's beloshin tzefayich, like the Nevi'im are called the tzefim tzefayich, since they were taught to us by the Nevi'im. The tzefim refer to it as manatz fach. In any case, who taught us these things? The Nevi'im. Manatz fach, tzefim amram. V'tizbra. How can you say that? V'oksiv ela hamitzvahs. The pasuk says, ela hamitzvahs asher tziva Hashem es Moshe el bnei Yisrael b'Har Sinai, and we learn from here. That's it. She'ein navi rashay lechadesh davar me'ata. Closed case. The Torah was given, and Nevi'im may not add to the Torah after it was given. How could the Nevi'im come and teach us new concepts in Torah? Void another kasha. Ha'amar Rav Chisda. Didn't Rav Chisda tell us that the following 2 letters, the mem, means the closed mem, v'samach, shebeluchos, that were in the luchos, where the letters were bored through and through, you would see the letter from both sides of the luchos. So it went from one side to the other. Problem is, typically a letter can be bored out and still appears a letter. What about the mem and the samach? Once you engrave that circle of the mem or the samach, what happens to the middle material, suspended midair? What's it going to be supported on? B'nes hayu. So these letters were just supported miraculously. Pretty clear that according to Rav Chisda, we already had that closed mem, we call the ender mem, in the luchos. How can you say that the Nevi'im were the ones who introduced it at a later date? 100% correct. Mehava havu, they were there. We knew about them. V'lo havu yadi, but Yisrael were not knowledgeable regarding their placement. Hai be'emtza teva v'hai b'seif teva. They didn't know where you meant to place these specific letters, the closed and the open mem. Which one belongs in the middle of a word? Hai be'emtza teva v'hai b'seif teva. Which one at the end? V'osot seifim b'tkinu. And the Nevi'im came along and they were masakin. They established for us that psuchim be'emtza teva, the open ones, belong in the middle of the word. Ustumin b'seif teva, and the closed ones or the long ones belong at the end. Same kasha again. Seif. Ultimately, ela mitzvahs. We learned that Shein HaNavi, Asid L'Chadish Davar Me'ata, a Navi cannot introduce new concepts to Torah. Ella, rather, Shachacham. Certainly at one point they knew, they had clarity regarding placement of these letters, but they forgot. The Nevi'im came along and they re-established it. They told us exactly how it meant to do it. So of course the obvious kasha is, what happened to all the Sefer Torah and the Tefillin that they had? How can they just forget such a crucial matter? Farshim seek to explain the Gemara according to one pshat. The Gemara means that they knew full and well that there were 2 different types of mems or nuns or tzadis, and apparently they did use it in that manner. So the closed mem was at the end of the letter of the word, and the open mem in the middle. But they figured it was optional. You can pick your choice. You can place either version at either point in the word. And the Nevi'im came along and said, no. the way it was used until now, that was correct usage. That's the way it's meant to be. The open mem in the middle of the word, the closed mem at the end of the word. The Omer Rabbi Yirmiyah, another statement, the name of the same man, the Omer. V'Omer Rabbi Yirmiyah, v'yitema some say Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Targum shal Torah, the Aramaic translation of Torah that we have alongside our psukim, Unklus Hager Omrei. This was taught us by Unklus, who was a ger. V'pi Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Yeshua. He taught us the name of his Rebbeim. In fact, the Rishonim say that the Targum Unklus wasn't just a random translation, it was something that we were Mekabel Misinai. Many psukim are only explained well through the Unklus. It was given together with the Torah Misinai. That's the Targum of the Chamishi Chumshei Torah. However, Targum Shel Nevi'im, the translation of the Nevi'im, Yonasan ben Azil Amroi, that was from Yonasan ben Azil, Mipi Chagai, Zechariah Malachi, who received it from these Nevi'im. Of course, he didn't live at the same time, it was about a 300-year gap. The Gemara means that he was Mekablet from those who received it from those that got it from Chagai, Zechariah Malachi. Now, when Yonasan ben Azil introduced the Targum of Nevi'im, he publicized it. What happened? V'nizdaza, there's a gersa ba'isa shah. At that moment, nizdaza, Eretz Yisrael was gripped with a quake. Started shaking. Arba me'as parsa, 400 by 400 parsa, a huge area of Eretz Yisrael. It started quivering and shaking. Yotzes a baskel v'amra, a heavenly voice calls out, Who's the one that dared revealing my secrets, explaining the Nevi'im and their hidden meanings to Bnei Adam, to the population? Amad Yonasan ben Azil Raglov. Yonasan got up on his feet and he says, Avam Ani, I'm the culprit. Ani u'shegilisis derechel Bnei Adam. I revealed your secrets to everybody. What was my motive? L'shem Shemayim. It's known and revealed to you, Hashem. I didn't have my honor in mind, nor my family's honor. Rather, I did it for your sake, to provide clarity in Torah, to minimize discontent and rivalry amongst Klal Yisrael, because there are many obscure psukim which can lead to differences of opinion and machlekes. I needed to provide clarity. In addition to that, he wanted to disseminate the translation of the Ksuvim as well, not only Nevi'im. This time the Baskel came out and says, Dayech, enough. Stop right there. My time, why stop there? What's wrong with teaching the Targum of Ksuvim as well? Mishum the Isbe Kates Mashiach. Because in Ksuvim you have the case, the end of the Gullus, and the Zman of Mashiach's arrival. Hashem didn't want that to be revealed. Asks the Gemara, the Targum shall Torah Unklus Agir Amr. Do you mean to say that the Targum of Chumash was taught by Unklus? It seems like it was around way earlier, already in the time of Ezra HaSefer, beginning of Bayis Sheni. V'ha Amar of Ikabar Abin Amar of Chananel Amar Rav. My Tchsiv. How do you understand the pasuk? Vayikru b'Sefer Torah Salakim. This was when they were reading the Sefer Torah written by Ezra HaSefer. They read the Torah. Mefoirish v'shaim v'sayim sechel v'yavinu b'mikra. So what was going on there? Explains the Gemara. Vayikru b'Sefer Torah Salakim. Zemikra. They read the actual text of the Sefer Torah. Mefoirish means they understood it well as a Targum with the translation, with the Aramaic Targum. There you go. They already had it in the time of Ezra HaSefer. By the way, the Vilna Gaon brings the right from this Gemara to the Halachah Shulchan Aruch. Although one is meant to do Shnai Mikra V'Echad Targum, to be Ma'avad the Sedra every week, Shulchan Aruch brings a Shita that perhaps if a person feels that Rashi would benefit him more than a Targum, he can do that. Although he says Yirei Shemayim should do both. Should have the Targum Unklus and Rashi covered during a Shnai Mikra. Vilna Gaon brings the right from Al Gemara. Targum is referring to the explanation. Meforish the Targum. Targum is something that's meant to expound, to give you true meaning and understanding of the Chumash. Whatever serves you better, if it's the Targum or in some cases Rashi. Whatever allows you true understanding, that's called Mefarish. So you choose Rashi, that's fine. So Mefarish is a Targum Onkelos. The Soim Sechel, what is that? Elu Psukim. They knew how to divide the text into verses, into psukim. That's why it's called a pasuk, by the way. Pasuk is a lashon of split. Nifsak. Hechem Psukim, Rashi says. Divided, split up into bite-sized pieces. So they read the Torah with the right psukim. Vayavinu b'mikra, what does that mean? Elu piskei tam, they had the exact tune, the what we call the trop, the tune of the psukim as well. V'amrila, some explain that it's referring to Elah HaMasoros. They had the exact tradition as per the spelling of the words, the chaser and the mali. In any case, they already had Targum then, beginning of Bayis Sheni. And here we say that Onkelos Hager, towards the end of Bayis Sheni, was the one who introduced it to us. Shachachum. True, they already had it, but they forgot. The Chosr used them, and then Onkelos Hager came back and re-established it, reintroduced it. Rabbi Yehuda learns that it wasn't so heavily used. Most people just forgot it with the passage of time. Most people. And Onkelos came, and he says, "V'yaste lemikri bebitzibur." He reestablished it as a din, as a part of the formal tefillah and kriyas Torah in the shuls. Lemikri bebitzibur. And now Klal Yisrael readopted the Targum. Okay, so we had Onkelos teaching us Targum of Torah, Yonas ibn Azil, Targum of Nevi'im, and then as Yisrael shook Nizdaza, he justified his actions, but that's it. They didn't let him go further. Asks the Gemara, Maishna, Doi Raisa, Delois Daza. When Onkelos taught us the Targum of Torah, there was no tremor throughout Eretz Yisrael. Vad Nevi is Daza. But when Nevi'im were translated, then we had Nizdaza Eretz Yisrael. It quaked, it quivered. Why is Nevi'im different than Torah? Answers the Gemara. Generally speaking, the words in the Chumash are self-explanatory. The pashat of meaning, the simple meaning, is meant to be understood by all. In fact, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, "Ben Chumash Hanam L'Mikra." Even a 5-year-old can understand Chumash. So explaining Chumash, its simple meaning, that's the way it's meant to be learned. As opposed to the Nevi'im Ika Mila de Mefarshin. There's some words, some psukim that are self-explanatory, meant to be understood, in their simple meaning. V'Ika Mili, but there are some words there, the Mistaman, that are obscure and meant to remain obscure. They contain secrets of Hashem, not meant to be publicized and taught to all. For instance, the Chsiv. Bayamahu, and that day, also Lavai, Yigdal Mispad B'Yushalayim, there'll be such a great hesped in Yerushalayim, Ki Mispad Hadad-Rimon Bevikas Megidon. That this great hesped of Hadad-Rimon in the valley of Megidon. And it's a bit obscure, we don't have Hadad-Rimon, we don't know what Bigas Megidon is. We have a point of reference that we're not familiar with. V'amar Yosef, he's an expert in Targum. He said, Ilmalei Targuma Da'ikra, if not for the translation of this pasuk in Nevi'im, I wouldn't know what it's talking about. Lo yadana my ka'amar. But now we do. Targum tells us, B'yemahu, during that day, Lo Sad Lavai, and Hashem will shechti Yitzhahara, as we learned in Mesach Sukkah. He escaped Misped B'Yushalayim. There'll be such a great Misped, even the tzaddikim will cry. The Gemara says, look, how could we have, look how far we got. They're going to cry tears of joy, and the Rishon are going to cry. The hesped will be so great. And it's compared to what? This great event. Kimisped the Achav, like the hesped, conducted when Achav was killed, the Achav bar Imri, who was actually a Rasha, but apparently he had some people that really cared about his passing. The Kotl Yosei Hadadriman Metariman, who was killed by Hadadriman, Birames Gilad. What's the next point of reference? Ukemisped the Yoshe bar Omen, and like the hesped, conducted when Yoshua was killed, the Kotl Yosef Chagar Chagira was killed by Para the Limp, Para Nechai. Because Megillah. So the Targum gives us an opening, opens a window into the Pshat, the Pasuk. So we see that there are many Psukim in Nevi'im that are obscure and contain secrets, speaking about Lasad Lavoi, and therefore Eretz Yisrael was Nizdaza when he revealed it. In any case, he justified his actions, but up to a point, he could not go to Ksuvim, which really contained secrets of Mashiach and Ketz HaKolos. We have another pasuk, which will be explained by the same Manda Omer. That's how it fits into this Gemara here. V're'isi ani Daniel levadei samar. Daniel describes a vision that he saw, and only he himself was able to see it. V'anoshim asher hayu imi. These people that were with me, as great as they were, lo yirau samar, they didn't experience this vision. Avol, but although they didn't actually see the vision, charod gedola nafalem, they were gripped by intense fear. They went into hiding. Maninu Ashnoshim, who are these great men that were with him? These three great Nevi'im, they were accompanying Daniel, and they didn't merit to see this vision. The Gemara says, actually, Inhu Adifu Minei, they had an advantage over him. V'iu Adif Minayu, but he had one over them as well. Inu Adifu Minei, they were greater than him. The Inu Nevi, they were classified as Nevi'im. V'iu Lav Navi, as opposed to Daniel, who was not technically a Navi. Now Rashi points out, when we say Inu Lav Navi, that means they were sent b'shlichos of Hashem to convey a message, to relay information to Klal Yisrael, as opposed to Daniel, who was loy nishtalech liYisrael b'shum nevuah, says Rashi. It seems from Rashi that, as per his madrega, of course he achieved the madrega of Navi, the Rambam, and you say that Torah, when it goes through the hilchos of nevuah, what constitutes a Navi, he explains the madregas that a Navi has to reach through much hard work and effort to become to such a pure spiritual state that he can mezeicha to nevuah. It seems like Daniel did reach that point, but he wasn't a public Navi. He wasn't sent b'shlichas Hashem to Klal Yisrael, as opposed to they, who were. Interesting, Rashi a bit later in the Masechta, when the Gemara has a list of 48 Nevi'im, Rashi does take it out, and Yidal Amud Aleph. He says Daniel was not a Navi, at least in that sense, of the list of those 48 public Nevi'im, but some bring from the Seder Oil that he is counted amongst the Nevi'im, so interesting discussion regarding the status of Daniel. Our Gemara considers him a Lav Navi. So they had an advantage over him, on the one hand. On the other side of the equation, we find Ihu Adif Minayu. He was greater than them. In this context here, the Ihu Chaza, because he experienced that vision, he was Zeicha to see that revelation of Hashem. V'inu lo Chazu, but they didn't. Apparently it pertained to him and not to them. Asks the Gemara. But if they didn't experience the vision, my time so why do they get scared? Because even though they personally didn't experience it consciously, but mazlayu chazi, their mazel did. Rashi says, Sar shall call Adam Lamala, a person has a malach, a sar. Who looks after him? Their malach noticed it. Their malach felt it. And that affected them as well. Amar Avina Shmamina, we learn from here, Haiman de Mibis, if a person is suddenly gripped by an inexplainable fear, Afag of the Eloi Chazi, is because, even though he's not seeing anything, Mazli Chazi, his mazel, sees some impending harm arriving. Maita Kante, what's the remedy? What should he do to counter the threat? Likha Krishma, he should say Krishma, that will protect him. If he happens to be in an unclean place, Linshuv Miduchli, should jump out of his spot and jump Arba Gamidi 4 Ames, get out of his mokim, which will help him evade the evil spirits. Viloi, if that's not an option, Leimachi should say as follows, following chant. Iza de Beitavchi, the goats in the slaughterhouse, Shmeina Minoi, is the goat in the butcher shop is fatter than myself. Go there. It's more interesting than myself. This way he diverts the shadim or mazikim perhaps that are after him. Continues the Gemara. V'ashta de amras Medina Medina. Vir le'ir le'drasha. Now that you've applied a drasha to this pasuk of Medina Medina Vir le'ir, as we discussed yesterday, to point out the different categories of which cities read on Yudalad, which on Tezvav. So we have a drasha for that pasuk. What about mishpacha mishpacha? That also seems to be extra words. Lamayasa. What's that coming for? Pasuk says, "Vayamim ha'ela niskarim v'nasim b'chol dar v'dar." We meant to celebrate Purim. Mishpacha mishpacha, every family. Medina Medina, v'ir v'ir. V'mei Purim ha'ela layavram techa Yehudim v'zichram layasav mizarim. Why mishpacha mishpacha? What's the point? Lamayasa. What's the lesson here? Amar Rabbi Yosef Rechanina. Lahavi, it's coming to address Mishpaches Kuhuna Ulaviyah, the groups of Kohanim and Levim who are involved in Avodas HaMikdash. They must abandon their Avodah, Shemavatan Avodasan, they terminate their service in the Beis HaMikdash, Ubayin L'Shmaya Mikra Megillah, to come here Megillah. Mishpacha, all families, including Kohanim and Levim, drop your Avodah and run to Mikra Megillah. It's a greater mitzvah. Persemanes. That takes priority. The Amar Rav Yehuda Marav, Kohanim b'Avodas. Even the Kohanim who are engaged in Avodah in the Mikdash, Levim b'Duchanan, Levim who are engaged in singing Shira on their stage, on their Duchan, V'Yisrael b'Mamadim, those groups of Yisrael who are present during the Karbanis, who represent Klal Yisrael during the Avodas Karbanis. Kulan mevatel avodasan. They drop their avodah, uboin l'shmoya mikra Megillah, and they come listen to the Megillah. Tani nami hachi. We have the same in a brayso. Kohanim b'avodasan, ulevim b'duchanan, v'Yisrael b'mamadan. Kulan mevatel avodasan, uboin l'shmoya mikra Megillah. Now, Tosfos asks kasha. Why do you have to be mevatel? How long does it take to listen to the Megillah? 45 minutes, an hour. Let them listen to Megillah and come back to the Avodah afterwards. Says Tosfos, right when the day starts, Mishaher Hayom, as soon as sunrise arrives, now it's time for Karban Tamid. The fact that they're procrastinating, pushing it off. Let's say there's a minyan there, right? So they have to listen to B'tzibur, they have to catch the minyan. They're going to postpone the Karban until later. That's called Mevatan Avodasan. The fact that they're negating, they're ignoring the avodah for the time being. That's what the Gemara means. Mevatlan avodasan, to go listen to Megillah. That's more important. Person Nisa is greater than doing avodah at first possible opportunity. Now the Turei Even adds, he says that when the Gemara says Mevatlan, it means literally they can actually cancel the avodah for Megillah's sake. Let's say it's the end of the day, and they're up to Tamid ben Arbaim, and they have not yet heard the Megillah. Suddenly a Megillah arrives. They will have to go to Megillah at the expense of the Karban Tamid ben Arbaim, and that's what the Gemara means as well. The Mevatel, the Avodah, even entirely, because Megillah takes priority. Even though Megillah is only the Rabbanon, it's a Apid the Kabbalah, but the significance, the Chashivas, the importance of this mitzvah, because it's Persume Nisa, publicizing Hashem's Neis, Hashgacha Pratis with Yisrael, that overrides. We can be mevatel another mitzvah as long as it's not an Isra that we're doing. We're just sort of passively ignoring another mitzvah. That's the halach. Now that we know that Megillah overrides Avodah in the Mikdash, Mikan Samcho Shal Beis Rebbe, based on this halacha, the Talmidim in the Beis Medrash of Rebbe concluded, Shemevatlan Talmud Torah Ubayin Lishmoya Mikra Megillah. Not only do you cancel Avodah in the Mikdash, you cancel the Shir. You stop learning Torah to go listen to the Megillah. Now, of course, you'll ask, why is that Bittul Torah? Megillah is also part of Torah. Everybody asks this kasha. Some give us simple teretz. Well, until you get to the shul, you get the tzibur together, you got the Balkar up there, banging Haman. So, it's not like just learning straight, you know. Others say there's Bittul Torah in quality. You learn a Geshmak, a piece of Gemara, you get into it, there's depth, there's iyun, there's a more quality type of learning than just reading through the Megillah in passing. Rabbi Shmuel Diskin said a chap. He says there are several words in the Megillah that we don't really understand. We just read it. We don't really understand what these things mean. He says those words are called Bittul Torah. Just saying without understanding. So you're in effect Mavatal Talmud Torah, because at that time you're not being Mekayim as Talmud Torah. You just listen to the Megillah. You do it by playing Mikra Megillah. Okay, so that was their conclusion. You set aside time for Megillah even at the expense of Torah. How do they know this? They learned it through Kal V'chomer from the fact that Megillah overrides Karbanis in the Mikdash. Uma avodah sheichamura mivatlinan. Since even avodah, which is more important than Torah, you would be mevatl for Mikra Megillah. Talmud Torah lekoshken, of course. Megillah takes priority over Torah, which is lower in standing. It stands lower than avodah in the Mikdash. That was their assumption. That avodah ranks higher, and since Megillah can override avodah, certainly Talmud Torah. Really? Avodah chamura mit Talmud Torah? Are you assuming that Korbanos ranks higher than Talmud Torah, which is the basis of your derivation here? Listen to this pasuk. This was when they laid siege around Yericho. Suddenly, Yeshua lifts his eyes. He takes a look. He sees the person standing there. And he bowed to him. Says the Gemara, how was he allowed to bow to an unidentified person in the middle of the night? Why may not offer shalom to somebody at night, somebody unidentified in the middle of the night? Why? We're concerned that perhaps he's a shade. You're not allowed to say shalom. Shalom, Rashi in Sanhedrin says, is one of the shmoisev shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You can't offer Hashem's name to a shade. How could he do this? In the middle of the night, Tosfos says out in the field, chutz la'ir, there are mazikim roaming, shadim roaming. All right, did he have to go ahead and greet a possible shade with Hashem's name? And certainly not to bow to him. Shani Hassan. The answer is because, look, the Amar Lei, the unidentified figure, responded to him and he says, Ki ani sar tzva Hashem. I'm one of Hashem's, a member of Hashem's army. I'm a Malach Hashem. V'duam is shakri. Maybe he's lying. Gemir, we know for a fact. Even a shade will be careful not to utter Hashem's name falsely. Once he said, Kani sar tzva Hashem, he knew with certainty that he's a Malach Hashem. So Yeshua asks him, Amalei. Sorry, the Malach was critical of Yeshua. He says, Amalei emesh betaltem tamid shel ben arbaim. Towards evening, you cancelled, without justification, you cancelled the tamid shel ben arbaim. V'achshav betaltem Talmud Torah. Now you're just sitting around and not learning. You're done with the war. Nighttime is not a time for warfare. Even though you're out in the battlefield, you should pull out a Gemara, learn your Daf Yomi. So I have two claims against you. You skipped a Talmud, you're not learning. Amalai, so Yeshua asks him, okay, apparently there's one thing that's really bothering you. Al ezem hen basa. What's the main thing that you have against us? What's the main claim? Amalai atabasi. Ata means the Torah. What's happening now, the Bittul Torah, is my main concern. Now, it's interesting that we don't find in the pasuk that the Malach actually spelled these things out. So how do we know that this conversation took place? We only find him saying Atabasi. But that indicates that there was a double claim going on. Let's take a look at Rashi, 14 lines from the bottom. Emesh betaltem, says Rashi, how do we know that the Malach laid forth both claims? Mitshuva sheishiva. We see it from the response, the fact that he said Atabasi, I came because of what's happening now, your current infraction. From that we learn that he had really two things. That we know that he started with two accusations. Emesh, towards evening, you should have brought the Talmud. You lingered in that siege around the city for no reason. There was no reason for it. Towards evening, everybody takes a break from war. You should have gone and be makriv the Talmud. Now Tosfos asks, so really why didn't they bring the Talmud? He says because the urn was out in the battlefield. It wasn't being kaimai the way it's meant to be in the Mishkan. Therefore, they couldn't bring the Talmud, but they should have. They should have worked it out. Should have taken a break, brought the urn back, and brought the Talmud. That's number one. The second accusation is, now that it's nighttime, you should have gotten straight back to the Svarim. There's no warfare now. I came because of what's going on now. Bittul Torah is what really concerns me. That's why I came running now. So Rashi is learning that the words atabasi, I came because of what's happening now. Bittul Torah indicates that there were really two things wrong. But the main priority, the main concern was the Bittul Torah. It's interesting, Tosfos says, I'll tell you pshat, Tosfos, where we see that he had two claims, two accusations. He says because Yeshua asked him, when he saw this figure, he figured it was some sort of heavenly sent messenger. He wasn't sure. Pasuk pshat in the pasuk is Halonu ato im l'tzarenu. That's the wording in the pasuk. Vayomer Elav Halonu ato im l'tzarenu. Are you one of ours, or do you belong to our enemies? So you realize that he's a malach. Are you the malach helping us, or do you belong to our enemies? That's the simple meaning of the pasuk. But in the drash, says Tosfos, we learn that he questioned him as per his motive. Why are you coming? Halonu ata. Are you coming because of Bittul Torah? Is that the reason why you're coming? Halonu, because of Bittul Torah, or litzarenu, says Tosfos, because of the karbanis that protect us from our enemies, from our tzarenu, from our attackers. So which one is it? Halonu ata, is it Torah or litzarenu because of the Bittul karbanis? And he responded, ata basi. Says Tosfos, Pirush Rivan, second from the last Tosfos. Pirush Rivan al Talmud Torah basi. Techsibei va'ato kisva lachem es hashir azois. The word va'ato, now, here and now, immersed in Torah at every given moment. Ato basi. It's because of Torah that I'm coming. Interesting pshat of Tosfos. In any case, we see clearly that his main concern was Torah, right? So you have a choice between karbanes and Torah. Torah takes priority. Continues the Gemara on the bottom line. Miyad, as soon as Yeshua heard this, he took it to heart. And going forward, during the next battle, he fixed it up. Miyad vayolan Yeshua balaylahu b'toicha emek. Let's take a look at Rashi again. 5 lines from the bottom. Miyad vayolan Yeshua balaylahu b'toicha emek. Rashi explains that it's not referring to that very night. Next time they laid siege on the city of Ai, that's when they corrected this and they immersed in Torah, even though it was the middle of the war, but they took off to learn Torah. That's what the Gemara means. Miyad, immediately, Yeshua sort of took it to heart. Going forward, he had a new plan for battle. Next time they had an opportunity, they were laying siege at night, Asak b'Torah. Tosfos says the same thing. On the last Tosfos on the page, 8 lines from the bottom. Actually, it's not really the way it's written in the pasuk. There's no pasuk of Vayolan Yeshua b'layla hu b'toicha emek, says Tosfos. In this story of Yericha, it says Vayolan b'layla hu b'toicha am. Next time he had a war, next time they laid siege on Ai, ksiv vayelech Yeshua b'layla hu b'toicha emek. V'derech hashas u'lekatzra psukim. We find many times throughout Shas that the Gemara shortens a pasuk. U'la'arvam yachad, shortens it and mixes 2 psukim together. There's no such pasuk in the Torah. We have v'nasan kesef, and we have a kamli elsewhere, and the Gemara puts it together, joins bits and pieces together, because look, we're not learning the actual pasuk. The point is the message to you, the lesson that we're learning. Torah Shabbat Peh is all about the meaning and the lesson behind the psukim. So we're not careful when it comes to quoting the psukim to do it with exactness and precision. The point is the lesson learned from the pasuk. So that night he decided, okay, we're going to stop this practice going forward. Next time, in Ai, they indeed follow the Malach's instructions. Rabbi Yehuda, says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Malamed, Shalom bu'umka shel halacha. Next time around, they immersed. Bo'emek halacha be'iram. They delved into the depths of halacha, even though they were in the midst of a battle. V'amar Shmuel bar Unya, Gadol Talmud Torah. In fact, from this episode, we learn that Torah is greater than Hakravas Karbanis. Shenema Atabasi. They missed the Talmud, they missed Torah. What was his main concern? Torah. That's going to be a kash. But although we learn that Megillah overrides Karbanis. Karbanis. How do you know it overrides Torah, which is greater than Karbanis? So how could the Talmidim of Beis Rebbe decide that Megillah supersedes Torah, because if it overrides Karbanis, of course Torah. What do you mean, Torah is greater? Like Kasha, the answer is, depends what Torah. Hada Rabbim, Hada Yacht. Talmud Torah, the Rabbim, is different. Rashi says, like by Yeshua, the Hasam Kol Yisrael Havu. There will be Mevatel Talmud Torah of all Kol Yisrael out in the battlefield. And that was a major concern. And that overrides Talmud. V'hada Yachad. But when we're speaking about individuals learning, even though it's a multitude, many people learning the Beis Medrash, the whole Lakewood Yeshiva gets up to listen to the Mikra Megillah. That's still called Yachad. And does not have the same level as Karbanis. And therefore, if Megillah overrides Karbanis, certainly Talmud Torah de Yachad. Would Yachad Kal, the Torah of an individual, is any less important? But now listen to this Mishnah. Noshim b'mayid ma'anis. Women who are involved in a lavaya, a hesped, on Chol HaMoed, they have to minimize. Ma'anis, they will chant. Avaloi metapchis, but not tap their hearts as an expression of mourning. Rabbi Shmuel Omer, if they were next to the mita of the mace, metapchis, they may tap. B'Rosh HaChadoshim, b'Chanukah, b'Purim, that's a step down. Doesn't have the same importance as Chol HaMoed. We allow more. Ma'anos or metapchis, they can chant, they can tap. B'zeh b'zeh, whether it's Chol HaMoed or any other holiday, Einan Mekaynes. Mekaynes they don't do. Rashi explains Mekaynes means that they respond to a chanter. It's more of an elaborate type of hesped. Okay, in any case, V'amar Rabba bar Huna, although we have restrictions pertaining to hesped and lavai, you want to minimize the avelis, the sadness on Yom Tov. Ein moyed b'pnei Talmud Chacham. If it involves a lavai of a Talmud Chacham, we do away with any moyed concerns. We ignore the moed completely. Koshkin Chanukah Purim. Of course, Chanukah Purim that rank last, rank lower than a Chol HaMoed. We get involved in the Levaya and the Hesped, even though, says Tosfos, perhaps the Hesped will get in the way of Mikra Megillah. It's pretty clear that even Talmud Torah of a Yachid, the one Talmud Chacham, stands higher than Mikra Megillah. And says the Gemara, Kavod Torah Ka'amris. Are we speaking about learning Torah? At this very moment, Mikra Megillah overrides. But Kavod Torah, the honor of Torah. You're honoring a person who embodies Torah, who personifies Torah, who represents a whole lifetime of learning. That's different. That stands higher. Kavod Torah the Yachid Chamer. Kavod Torah, even of a Yachid, stands higher than Mikra Megillah. Talmud Torah the Yachid Kal. The actual learning at this very moment of a Yachid, okay, Megillah overrides that. But Kavod Torah stands higher. Okay, Amar Rava. Let's go through all these equations. Let's see what's more important than what. Pshitali, it's clear to me you're faced with a choice between avoida in the Mikdash or Mikra Megillah. Mikra Megillah Adav. Of course, Megillah overrides. How do I know? With Rabbi Yisrael Chanina. He learned this from Mishpacha, right? That all the families of Kehan and Levim will set aside, put away the avoida, go to Megillah. So that's Pasht. Talmud Torah Mikra Megillah. You have a choice between learning and Megillah. Of a Yachid, right? Talmud Torah of a Yachid. Mikra Megillah Adav, of course, Megillah comes first. How do I know that? Medu Samchu, Shavais Rabbi, we find that the Talmidim of Rabbi, they relied on this halacha of avoida and Megillah, and they drew a parallel, or Kavachemet, to learning. Megillah comes first. Talmud Torah Umeis Mitzvah. Oh, here comes a new shayla. If it's a question of learning or attending to a mace, you see a lavaya. Do you learn or do you join the lavaya? Mace Mitzvah Adav. A mace mitzvah comes first. With the sanya, Mevatlan Talmud Torah, Loitzas a mace, Lachnosas Kala. Like we all do, we stop learning, we go to lavaya leilin or chasana. Now Tosfos points out that the word mace mitzvah is lavdavka. Typically, a mace mitzvah means an unattended mace who has nobody to care for it. As we're going to see soon in the Gemara, even a kohen could take care of such a mace. When it comes to bittul Talmud Torah for a mace, it's any mace. It deserves your attendance at his levaya. Continues the Gemara. What about avodah mace mitzvah? You have a choice between serving in the Mikdash, bringing a carbon, or attending to an unattended mace. Here we're speaking about a really unattended mace who has nobody to care for it. Mace, mitzvah, adav, the mace comes first. Mil v'la'achoyse, we learn it from a pasuk, the sanya. V'la'achoyse matamad leimer. Rashi brings us a whole brisa by Nazar, a kohen, gadol, may not become tamei, even to members of his family who passed away. Now the pasuk spells out mother, father, brother, sister, which are superfluous words because it already says you can't become tamei to kroiv, right? So the Gemara goes through each one. Why mention that he can't be matame to his sister? There's a chiddush here, which will actually result in a leniency. If a fellow was on the way to bringing his carbon Pesach, but to do milah for his son, and he hears about a relative that passed away, perhaps this would justify becoming tamei, to attend to that mace. Amris, no, lo yitame, of course not. Because there are others that can take care of the mace. Perhaps I would think, just like he can't become tamei by attending to his sister's funeral, he can't even take care of an unattended mace, who has nobody to look after it. That's what the pasuk says, to teach us. To a sister, standard relative, you can't be matame. Avol matame l'meis mitzvah, but to a meis mitzvah you could. Kavod habriyos. Even though it's going to be at the expense of what? What is he going to do? To bring carbon Pesach. So we see that a meis mitzvah overrides karbanis. By Rav. Now comes a shayla. Mikra Megillah, a meis mitzvah. Person is faced with a choice. Should I go listen to the Megillah or take care of a meis mitzvah? Hai minayu adav, which one is greater? What's the shayla? Mikra Megillah adav, should we say Megillah comes first? Mishum persuminisa. It involves publicizing the nace. The great miracle that took place on Purim. That's a chash of a mitzvah. That comes before meis mitzvah. Or perhaps meis mitzvah adav, mishum kavod habriyos. No, meis mitzvah comes first. Human dignity. Basa the Baya, Adav Pashta. After he presented the question, he concluded, certainly meis mitzvah adav, meis comes first. Kavod habriyos. Damar Mar, as we learned, Gadol kavod habriyos. You know how great human dignity is? Shadeicha es loisese shebeter. Even overrides a loisese. Which loisese? Let's take a look at Rashi, around halfway down the Amid. Es loisese. Techse loisucha leis alim, says Rashi. By the Aveda that a person finds. You can't just ignore it. Loisucha leis alim. Uksiv v'salamta. But then the pasuk says, v'salamta, you could ignore it. Should you ignore it or should you not? Which way do we go? And the Gemara Baba Metzia says, well, it depends on the situation. Depends who you are. Depends on your status. You don't have to degrade yourself for that person's Aveda. But amishata misalim. If you're going zokin, if a big Talmud Chacham finds a old doll on the street, it's not It's not becoming of him to tend with a doll. So you see that kavod habriya is human dignity. Overrides even a loisas say. And therefore says Rava, of course, it takes priority over Mikra Megillah. So in summary, we have the following pyramid, so to speak. On the very top comes Meis Mitzvah. That comes before everything. The next level we have Talmud Torah de Rabbim, which is pretty much on the same level as Kavod Torah of a Yachid. Both these things override Mikra Megillah, which comes before Avodah in the Mikdash or Talmud Torah de Yachid. Alright, simple enough. Gufa, let's go back to the halacha we learned yesterday. Omer B'Shimon Levi, we spoke about the fact that in a krach, in a walled city, they read on the 15th. Well, the halacha of krach is not only limited to the city itself, but to any suburb that is found within its municipal boundary, within Tchum Shabbos, or something that can be seen from the city. That's also a connection and an adequate association. Omer B'Shimon Levi krach v'kol asamachlei, the city and anything next to it, v'chol anira imay. Any town that can be seen from the city, nidan kekrach, it is incorporated, so to speak, when it comes to the halachas of Megillah, into the krach. Tana, we learned in the Brisa. Samach, if it's close by, within a mill, as we learned yesterday, aval b'shein nira, even though you can't see it from the town. Nira, but if it's seen, that's also fine. Aval b'shein samach, even though it's not close by. So either or does it. Now, bishlam and nira, aval b'shein samach. Certainly you can explain a case where it's seen from the town, but it's not close by. How's that? Going to Yasfa, B'rei Shahar. You have a little suburb sitting on top of the mountain. So he can actually see the city, but he's miles away. That's okay. How do you have a case where it's close by, but you can't see one from the other? How's that? Or Rabbi Yehuda, a little town is stuck in a deep canyon, so he's close by, but out of eyesight. So either way, it works. Va'amar Shimon Levi, another halacha. Krach, a walled city, sheyashav v'lebasei hukav, which was inhabited, which was settled, and then afterwards they built a wall around that city. That doesn't work. Nidon kikfar, we consider it like a town. It doesn't have the halacha of a walled city. And Tosfos actually learns this is halacha from Megillah as well. A walled city means you made that wall, and then inside you have the houses. So in that order, wall, and then you built the houses. So now they all came to live in a walled city. But if you first built the houses, and then, only then, you say, okay, no, let's build a wall around it. It's too late. It's not considered a walled city. My timer. How do we know this chiddush? From a pasuk. T'chsiv, v'ish ki yimkar, beis moishav ir chayma. If one sells a house in a walled city, he can go and redeem it up until a year. That's a special halacha for a house in a walled city. How does the Torah describe it? Moishav ir chayma, which means that they settled in a wall. Shehukav, it was first surrounded by a wall, attained the status of a walled enclosure, and then l'basef yashav, and then it was settled. V'lo sheyashav l'basef hukav, as opposed to first building the homes, settling, and then having surrounded by a wall. Omer Shimon Levi, another halacha. Krach she'ein b'asar batlan, nidan kikfar. We speak about a city reading on the 14th of Adar, right? Ayoris. In this case, the word krach, says the Ran, is just another way of saying a large city, not necessarily a walled city. A big city who's meant to read on the 14th of Adar. If it doesn't feature a group of people who are on standby, they're asar batlan, they're reserved for minyan, forming, for sitting in the base medrash. That's their job. If a town doesn't have that, it's not a big enough city, it's not called a ir. And we treat it like a krach, like a little village, in which case they will be makdim liyam aknisa. They will read whenever they come into the big city, Mondays and Thursdays. Krach she'ein by asar batlan, a city that does not feature this element of asar batlan. Rashi says, about 10-12 lines from the bottom, asar batlan means shebetelem melachtan, They're off from work. They're hired for the job. They sit in the shul, shachas v'arvis, to make that minyan, to ensure a continuous minyan. So the shul hires these people, sit and learn, sit and daven. You're the minyan of the city. But town doesn't have that. We treat it nidan k'kfar. And Farshim learn because the minyan, the presence of a minyan in this town is unreliable, therefore Chacham will makel. You don't have to take a chance and wait for the minyan to show up, which might never happen. You can treat yourself like a kfar and just read on Mondays and Thursdays when you come into the cities. What's the chiddush of Rabbi Shimon Levi that you need a Asar Batlan? Of course, Tanina, we already learned in the Mishnah. What constitutes a large city, which reads on Yudalad, and does not read Liyam Aknisa? They have Asar Batlanin. Parchas Mekan, of the only less than 10 Matlanin, how is it kfar? We treat it like a town. So what's the chiddush? We already have this in the Mishnah. Krach et strichle. Here comes the chiddush. Rabbi Shimon Levi spoke about a krach that doesn't have Asar Batlanin. A krach is just a huge city. It's not just a plain ear. It's a metropolis. It's a place where people come to shop and to do business. Afagav de Mikle, the chiddush is even though it's a krach, which is visited by many outsiders, the Mikle Me'alma, they come from all over. Perhaps you would say, well, you can rely on the fact that there'll be a minyan. No, you don't have to rely on that. You never know. Everybody's milling around, suddenly, they're all gone. Therefore, you don't have to commit yourself to reading on your Daled. As soon as you come to the big city on Monday and Thursday, you can read that. One malacha. V'amar b'Shimon Levi. Krach shechorav al b'sayf yashav. A city which was destroyed and then re-established. Nidan krach is treated like a krach, and they read on the Yudalit. What do you mean? My charav. What do you mean that it was destroyed? Ilay machar b'chay moisav means that the walls were destroyed. So start with a wall. Right? Sorry, you read on Tezvav. Start with a wall. And it was destroyed. You tell me, well, if it was rebuilt, then it's considered a walled city. Right? My charav. Ilay machar v'chay moisav was speaking that the walls were destroyed. Yashav in. So only if it was rebuilt, we say it reattains its original status. But otherwise, if it wasn't rebuilt, it doesn't reattain its original status, you don't need that. Again, back to the case where he's selling a house in a walled city. The spelling of the pasuk is with a aleph. Asher loy choyma lamed aleph. It sounds like it doesn't have a wall. But we read it with a vav. Asher loy, it has a wall. What's the deeper meaning behind the spelling? We learn from here a chiddush. Asher loy choyma, he doesn't have a wall. Currently speaking, the wall's gone. But originally he had a wall. That's enough. Because it was stamped. You are a walled city. So even though practically the wall was demolished, doesn't matter. So in this case, if it was a walled city, and they were reading on Tesvav, let's say, so even though it lost its wall, it doesn't matter. You don't have to rebuild that wall. So why does Rabbi Shimon Levi insist on having that wall rebuilt? Ella my charav. Oh, no. We're not speaking about the halacha of walls here. We're speaking about a city without a wall. Okay? And they read on Yudalit. But we just spoke about the fact that you need that additional feature, the Asar Batlanin, to make it into a large city. Otherwise, it's like a town. Elamai Charav, when we say destroyed, it means Shecharav Masar Batlan, they lost their 10 people. At which point they lost their city status. But Allah is if they re-attract new 10 people, so they get new Asar Batlanin, they're back to square one. Says Taisus, what's the chiddush? Perhaps I should be concerned like there's a pattern going on. People are leaving and coming. It's unreliable. And perhaps I should not consider the city as a real city, in which case I'm committed to Yudalit. No, chiddush is no. Once you get your 10 Batlanim back, you reopen the koil. You're back to the original status, you consider it like a city, and you're committed to reading Megillah on Yudalit. Okay, let's do a quick chazara. Rabbi Yirmiyah and some say Rabbi Chia bar Abba told us 3 things. The letters Menatzbach, those double letters, were introduced refreshed by the Nevi'im. The Targum of Torah was taught by Unclus Agdir. Daniel saw the vision, and Chage, Zechariah, Malachi, who were Nevi'im, did not, but they were gripped by fright because their Malach experienced it. We learned that Meis Mitzvah stands on top of everything. Then comes Talmud Torah de Ravim and Kavod Torah de Yachid, and all these will override Megillah, which overrides even Avodah the Mikdash or Talmud Torah de Yachid. Rabbi Shmuel Levi tells us a couple of halachas regarding a krach. Anything next to it or within sight is included. It needs to be, the wall needs to be built, and then the inhabitants arrive, the houses are built. A krach needs to have asar batlanin, and even if it lost it at a certain point, but if it regains it, it retains its original status. All the best to you, and Hatzlacha Rabbah.